The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.
The third president of Georgia, Mikhail Saakashvili, to be transferred to Gori Military Hospital, such is the decision of the government after the many comments from Georgia's strategic partners and allies on the treatment of the former president.
The U.S. Department of State commented on the treatment of Mikhail Saakashvili. We're closely following the treatment of former President Mikhail Saakashvili since his arrest on October the 1st. We commend the oversight work of the Georgian public defender in establishing an independent medical team to evaluate Mr. Saakashvili's health and to review the state of medical facilities at the prison hospital. We urge the government of Georgia to treat Mr. Saakashvili fairly and with dignity, as well as to heed the public defender's recommendations about appropriate treatment. We also strongly urge the government of Georgia to ensure Mr. Saakashvili is able to attend all court hearings for his pending criminal cases in line with international law. Mr. Saakashvili has a right to a fair trial, which includes the opportunity to attend court hearings in person, should he request to do so, reads the statement.
U.S. Ambassador Kelly Degnan made a comment regarding the health condition of former President of Georgia, Mikhail Saakashvili. Kelly Degnan notes that debates must not be held when human life is in danger and relevant steps should be taken. We are very concerned about the health condition of Mikhail Saakashvili. Debates must not be held when human life is in danger. He should have the opportunity to receive proper treatment and medical care. We trust the panel of doctors organized by the public defender, who assesses that Mikhail Saakashvili's health condition is critical.
He needs comprehensive, multi-profile medical care in order to improve his health. Accordingly, he must receive proper treatment at the appropriate facility. As you know, there is a great interest towards this issue from our embassy, as well as from Washington and from the Friends of Georgia. The former ambassador to Georgia, Mr. Ian Kelly, also appealed to Georgian authorities to take ex-president Mikhail Saakashvili to a civilian hospital, the U.S. ambassador stated.
Just take him to a damn civilian hospital, former U.S. Ambassador Ian Kelly wrote on Twitter. Saakashvili has said he will end his hunger strike if he is taken to a civilian hospital. Put a perimeter fence around it. If you are worried about unrest, just do the responsible thing and do it, he wrote.
EU Ambassador to Georgia Karl Hartzell commented on the treatment of Mikhail Saakashvili. The European Union fully supports the Public Defenders Institute and its deeds and its role in Mikhail Saakashvili's case so that his rights are defended. We want Saakashvili's health situation to be in focus and assessed objectively. We would like to see the implementation of those recommendations that are underlined by the events unfolding in the last 24 hours. It is important that today's deadlock is moved forward and relevant steps are taken in the direction of considering Georgia's local rights and international obligations, stated the EU Ambassador to Georgia, Karl Hartzell.
You are watching The Checkpoints with Elena Kvanchilashvili and myself, I'm David Jalagonia, and we are here to tell you more about business and economics.
Sunday, 10 p.m. sharp, and we're ready to start. Catapult Georgia won the first ever venture capital investment fund to be incorporated in Georgia with a portfolio of 50 million USD. It will support innovative startups and their quick expansion on the global market.
The Prime Minister of Georgia highlighted that the Venture Capital Investment Fund is yet another significant step toward transforming the country into a regional innovations hub. According to Irakli Garibashvili, it will have the full support of the Georgian government, and the Innovations Agency of the country will be one of its key partners.
Yes, Catapult is a venture capital investment fund specialized in technical hubs beyond the Silicon Valley. Its investments reached 220 million USD in over 15 years in more than 100 companies. US Ambassador Kelly Degnan also welcomed the VC fund in Georgia with a very interesting focus on the need for reforms, especially in the justice sphere.
We are really thrilled to be able to support Georgian investors, Georgian startup companies, where the drive and the creativity and the independent thinking that Georgians and Americans share can really flourish. And Georgia has scored well on a number of business indexes, but of course, to attract good investors, you need more than just a ranking on a business index. You need to have a framework in place and the substance in place for investors to see that there's a level playing field here, that their contracts and their business agreements will be upheld in a timely and impartial manner. And that means there needs to be a credible judicial system in place, as well as a business framework and a government that's conducive to business investments.
Here's the interview with Jonathan Tower, founder and managing partner of Catapult VC, a venture investment fund interested in Georgia and its startups. Thank you for your time, first of all, and I would like to know in the very beginning why are you interested in investing in Georgia, and what's your experience in Georgia as well?
Yes, so I've been coming to Georgia pretty regularly for the last 3 to 4 years. I first got introduced to Georgia. I was invited to be a startup VC judge for the JITA program back in 2018, 2019, and I've been a judge at every batch since. And so I've seen a steady progression in the quality of startups coming out of not only JITA, but also the broader Georgian tech ecosystem. And so we believe that Georgia has an opportunity to be a dominant tech hub for the Caucasus. And my firm, as a focus, specializes in investing in what we consider underserved tech ecosystems. And we believe Georgia has the opportunity to really grow in the next 5 to 10 years. And we want to be the first firm to come here to build a practice.
How can you assess Georgian startup ecosystem? As far as I know, you know our country well enough already.
Well, I've been assessing it for the last 3 to 4 years. Like I mentioned, I've been seeing the startups that have come through the program. And if you are aware of how the program works, there are hundreds and hundreds of startups go through the boot camp, and then they get curated down to about 50 to 75 companies. And then I have the privilege of seeing those companies pitch. So I get a good sense after 50 pitches over 2 or 3 days, really the overall quality of the very best startups coming out of Georgia. So having done that now 6 or 7 times, I've got a pretty good sense about the quality of the companies. And like I said, I think that quality has been increasing every time I've done it. And so that was one of the reasons why we decided that this is the right time to spin up a fund.
According to your experience in Silicon Valley, what kind of challenges do they face, especially in developing countries like in Georgia? What kind of challenges do startups face?
Yeah, there are a number of challenges. I think one of them is that in markets like Georgia, there isn't much of a venture ecosystem here. There aren't that many venture investors. Sometimes there are no venture investors. There are angels. And unfortunately, although they may be well-meaning, a lot of the angel investors in smaller markets, they're not experienced investors. They don't necessarily understand how to do venture investing, right? The angel investors typically made their money in other industries. So maybe they made their money in real estate or manufacturing. That's fine, but it's not tech investing. And so one of the problems that creates is that the type of investments that they make in startups tend to make it hard for startups to raise more money after that particular financing round. So when they try to present to firms like us in Silicon Valley, it's very difficult for us to invest in those startups because they made a lot of mistakes in raising capital from angel investors. So one of the challenges is educating angel investors in these markets to understand what the best practices are for startup investing so that they can give those startups the best chance that they can to become globally successful.
You already mentioned that you see steady progression here in Georgia. Can you specify in which field do you see this progression?
Well, I don't say it's a particular field. I mean, the startups are working in all sorts of areas, right? It's consumer, e-commerce, it's enterprise, it's frontier technologies, there's a number of different sectors, and every batch has startups that touch upon something. So I can't tell you that there's one particular sector that Georgia has found a real core competency in. I think broadly across the companies that we see, the overall quality has gone up. And I think what's also important is that we're now seeing startups coming out of Georgia that are being accepted into tier 1 venture acceleration programs like Y Combinator and other programs that are quite prestigious. And because of that, it's a good positive signal to show that the startups coming out of Georgia are now being recognized globally by other investors, not just by us.
And giving some advice, like what kind of skills do they need to be successful in this huge market like Silicon Valley?
Yeah, so I mean, the startup skills are no different than they would be in the US, right? Startups need to think about go-to-market, building a product and service, building teams properly, all the typical disciplines that every startup needs to understand. The problem or the challenge in a market like Georgia is that you haven't been doing this very long. It's a fairly new phenomenon where startup investing, building startups in Silicon Valley, they've been doing that for 70, 80 years. And so there's a lot more experience in those markets. And so what we try to do is to leverage that when we come to Silicon Valley by helping those startups, given the fact that we've been doing this for so long. And we also bring lots of other partners with us that also have deep experience in understanding what those skills are and then mentoring the startups in Georgia to acquire those skills so they can be successful internationally.
Let's proceed talking about your plans in Georgia in this fund. And when is sought to approve one of the first projects? What are you working on for now?
Yeah, so we just recently announced our intentions to do a fund here in Georgia. We're very fortunate to have JITA and the government of Georgia as an anchor investor in the fund. That was a very important part of how we come to markets like Georgia. We always want to bring in local investors that provide us credibility, access, reputation. And so having the government of Georgia and the JITA program as an anchor investment in the fund is a huge thing for us and a real feather in our cap. But it's the beginning. We are fundraising now. We are having active conversations with other investors in Georgia to raise additional capital. And then once we get to a certain number, we will then be able to raise capital outside of Georgia, right? So there's a process with how we actually put a fund together. And this will take several months as we go to market with the fund. In terms of when we expect to make our first investments in the fund, we'd like to do it by the end of the year, early part of next year. We already have probably a dozen startups that we have in our pipeline that we have had early conversations with, we have vetted, that we believe once we are in a position to deploy capital, we would like to invest in those startups. So we think it'll probably be a couple of months before we begin deploying capital, but once we're up and running, we'll be doing that on a fairly regular basis.
And you know that tax system is very important also in terms of developing some new projects, especially in this country, in Georgia. How can you assess how flexible is Georgian tax system? What do you think from your point of view?
Taxes?
Tax system, yeah.
I mean, it's fairly flexible. I mean, there are areas that we'd like to work with the government to put together different types of infrastructure that's a bit more startup friendly, a bit more investor friendly, but it takes a while, right? It's not something that's going to happen overnight, but we invest at very early stage. And so it's not as big of a concern for us at this point because most of the startups that we invest with don't have big revenue, they don't have big tax exposure. And so we're able to invest in markets like Georgia, where some of the tax regulatory environment may not be as favorable as we'd like it to be. But I think over time, we'll work with the government and other entities in Georgia to put together not just taxes, but other regulatory issues. So a bankruptcy law, labor law, all that is very important to startups, but also to attract investors to Georgia. They want to see parity with other markets like the US and Europe, so that when they invest in Georgia, they're not going to be surprised by how they will be treated as investors in that market. And that takes time. That takes time to work with the government to help them understand the infrastructure to put in place to attract investors such as us.
When we are talking about labor law, for example, on the one hand, we have a little bit cheap workforce in Georgia, you know about it, but on the other hand, there is some kind of deficit in some fields in terms of qualified professionals. How can you assess our environment in this way?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I think there are, clearly it's a less expensive market to operate, and that is attractive, because as an investor, that means we get a lot more leverage on our capital in Georgia. Our money goes further in Georgia than it would be in the US or in parts of Europe that are much more expensive. That's a very big advantage for Georgia, and I think Georgia can take advantage of that to grow its ecosystem. On the negative side, you're correct. There are some deficits. We do have some talent areas that aren't quite as developed, where we need to work with the educational environment, the university environment, to develop programs over time to improve the quality of the technical education. The rest is just experience. I think a lot of the experiential deficits we see is because the teams here haven't done this for very long. And so it's difficult to find 50 candidates that have experience in go-to-market strategies, 50 candidates that have built products from 0 to 60 and taken a company to a level of outcome that you might find in New York or San Francisco. But every market has that problem. And so it does take time, but we believe we're at a point in time for Georgia where we're getting some excitement around the ecosystem here. People are looking at Georgia in a way they didn't several years ago. And we think once we spin up the fund here, we'll have an ability to attract other entrepreneurs who may not be in Georgia right now. Maybe they're in Ukraine, maybe they're in Belarus, who would like to maybe come to Georgia and bring their technical skills to Georgia and become part of the Georgian tech ecosystem.
Do you expect to see Georgian local business and companies in this fund as well, to cooperate with them as well? You're waiting for them, I say.
Yeah, so we do, and we're already getting some inbound interest and some commitments from local businesses in Georgia. Yeah, the banks, we'd like them to be in. We think they will be. It makes a lot of sense for the banks to be affiliating with us, because you have to think about, from their perspective, startup ecosystem, these are all going to be potential bank clients. Startups need banking services. As they grow and they get larger, they're going to need all sorts of financial services. Those banks want to provide those services, so it's good for their business to have the capacity to service startups as clients. But also, from a branding and messaging perspective, the idea of science, technology, and innovation is critically important for economic growth in markets like Georgia, right? The future of Georgia are these types of jobs. And so every bank, I think, here in Georgia would like to be considered part of this movement. They'd like to be considered a forward-thinking, future-focused bank, not a bank of the past. And so I think by working with us, not only will it be able to build a portfolio of startup clients that are affiliated with us as potential portfolio companies, but also they want to be perceived by the Georgian population as a technology-focused bank, a bank of the future, fueling the future of Georgia.
And today, what can you say, what's your long-term plans in Georgia?
So our long-term plans in Georgia is we are building a long-term relationship with Georgia. We are not doing just one fund. The name of the fund is Catapult Georgia #1. That implies we're going to have Catapult Georgia #2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth. So we are building the infrastructure in place now with the partners and the collaborations that we have in place to have a team here for the foreseeable future. And we think that as we build this first fund, within short order, we'll be thinking about doing possibly a regional fund that will be investing in not only Georgian companies, but companies in the Caucasus, companies in Central Asia, because it all connects the ecosystem to each other, right? Georgian companies, as they grow, they're going to probably want to penetrate the Armenian market, the Azerbaijan market, go to Ukraine, go to Belarus. There are other markets that they want to go to before they come to the US. And so for us to have boots on the ground in those markets is advantageous for us, it's advantageous for our companies. So as we grow our platform, that is more assets that we can leverage for our startups here.
Thank you for your time. We are looking forward to upcoming projects as well and meeting with you as well.
Thank you for having me.
Well, every successful business was a startup once. Today we will be telling you about Ani Gozi, which aims at substituting nut imports by 20-30%. The company believes it can fully supply the local market starting next year already. The main plan for the near future is to export nut vacuum packaging.
Anna Kevkishvili, the founder of Ani Gozi, says Georgia has all the potential for establishing itself as a niche for quality nut production.
I am Anna Kevkishvili, the co-founder of the Ani Gozi company. The company was founded in 2020. The idea was to create one of the first walnut processing enterprises in Georgia. We wrote a project for the Rural Development Agency, a project of processing and saving enterprises. We won and received a grant and professional agro credit, within the framework of which we managed to establish a walnut processing enterprise in Georgia. The enterprise is located in Lilo. We have chosen this location specially to focus on the gardens of different regions, not only Kakheti, where walnut orchards are active, but also Raja, Shida Kartli, Kwemo Kartli, and other regions where walnut orchards are actively developing. Interest in this field started in Kakheti, where we engaged in agriculture and viticulture. At the time, we wanted to do something innovative, and we chose nuts. We really did not anticipate the risks and challenges that were ahead of us. When we did not get the right result, it was a challenge. We saw the potential for development in this area, the lack of knowledge also, which is one of the main problems in Georgia. There was a growing number of orchards that were developing with no mediator actors who would process the bought products from the farmers. This enterprise had the potential to process 500 tons of walnuts per year. This year was the beginning. This is not the full amount we have received. We want to continue to receive, break down, and then sell the already processed walnuts. We're focused on the local market to supply Georgian quality walnuts to the facilities, to equip them with confidence in terms of quality stability. We plan to enter the international market from next year. We want Georgian walnuts to be recognized by the international market as high-quality products. At this stage, there is a lot of interest from EU countries, Asian countries. Of course, there is a lot of interest coming from Russia and Ukraine as well. We will decide in which direction to go, depending on the situation in the international market, as well as the price category, which will be more interesting for us. Our plan is to replace imports, which will be replaced by 20-30% this year only. We want to introduce the Georgian market and prove that the Georgian market is not only of the same stable quality, but even better than imported walnuts.
David, let us now zoom out a little bit and look at the bigger picture. What could be the new components for supporting exports from Georgia, and what role could a diversified pool of exhibition opportunities play for those keen on exports? Georgi Sakadze talked to Mikhail Hidureli, head of Enterprise Georgia.
Misha, thank you so much for, well, as always, for the quick traditional response. My objective for this interview definitely is going to be export, but I really want to mention about the trigger of our interview, which is Anuga exhibition, which was held maybe a month and a half ago, if I'm mistaken.
Yes.
It was held in Germany, in Köln. Very important exhibition, but it is another. You're reporting, I mean, your agency is reporting about 3.7 million Georgian lari already contracted for Georgian entrepreneurs. Please brief us about the exhibition itself, which means that it's just the beginning for the contracts, which was just done within the month. More than 1 million. And please tell us about Georgian wine. I mean, it was some other goods which was to mention even more.
Thank you, Georgi. Always a pleasure. Yeah, I think we are always talking about FDI and investment, and we talk about export even less. And I think it definitely deserves the designated attention. Anuga is one of the, let's say, the most successful exhibitions that is attended by Georgian companies. 16 Georgian companies attended this year. We already have a pre-agreement of around 4 million Georgian lari, and you are right, the first orders are always low in terms of the, let's say, in terms of the value, because companies need to test the Georgian company first.
Value and the future interest as well.
Of course. It's always, the first one is always the smallest one, and then it grows. But I think from one exhibition, it's only 1.5 months passed, and we already have almost 4 million Georgian lari agreements, which is important. What is most important is that the products are diversifying, right? So if before it was dominated by wine, now we have hazelnut, which is important. We have honey, and that has a great potential. And we have some kind of herbs. It's called
Zirtpila. It was, yeah.
It's used in pharmaceutical business. It has a high content of calcium, and this is one of the things that is, let's say, gets attention of foreign importers. What is also most important?
Please, Misha, go ahead. But it was more than 300 meetings held in Köln, in Germany. It was presented by various investors and interesting group. And who are the main partners? I mean, who contracted Georgian entrepreneurs?
Yeah, these are the companies. Of course, I mean, it's the company's relations is always confidential. But these are the companies. Some of them from Germany, some of them international. The traders. The companies have opportunity to present their products directly, and the traffic on Anuga is very, very intense. There's a lot of people going in, going out, and year after year we always try to have our stand on a visible place. So and because this is important, because it attracts most traffic. So this is one thing. We're going to continue on organizing other exhibitions, like big exhibitions like CL Paris. We hope that next year we will attend physically the China Import-Expo Shanghai, which is one of the most successful ones. And also we are diversifying our products that we are exhibiting. And next year, for example, we are bringing Georgian solar panel manufacturer to United States. That will have an exhibition there, which means that this is again a new sector. Another one is the birds and animals and pets nutrition, food component that is also being added to our list, and we will be bringing 4 Georgian companies from this sector to Abu Dhabi, again a new sector. And of course, a good news is that our beneficiary, Dr. Goods, as well, is attending an exhibition which is not organized by Enterprise Georgia. But the good thing to mention is that it will be the first case where
independently, they will participate independently. I mean, Dr. Goods.
Yes, independently in Düsseldorf, and this is also a new sector. This medical equipment. So we see that it's not only wine anymore, and we are expanding there as well. The next thing that I want to mention to you is the technical assistance for export program that we will be launching from the beginning of next year, from January. This means that the exporters, excluding the agriculture.
This is a new launching or additionally service which you discussed with the Prime Minister and other members of the economic team. The meeting which was held in the State Chancellor a few days ago. This is a new program or some additional value?
No, the meeting with the Prime Minister was concentrated on the FDI and investment attraction. The program that I'm mentioning was pre-agreed with the government and the Prime Minister before this meeting. It's a long way that we've been preparing this product. This is a product excluding agricultural exporters, because Rural Development Agency under Ministry of Agriculture has its own export technical assistance program. So we concentrated to fill up the gap of non-agricultural exporters. So what we are helping the companies will be things like co-financing the entrance fee in foreign supermarket chains. This is very important. Another thing is branding. packaging, and of course certifying, right? We will be helping companies to co-finance the, let's say, the quality audit of the factory, and then of course the licensing and certifying the factories. I think this is important. Another big thing that we did with the banks, of course, is a new program that is called Business Export, which means that the companies, the sectors that are export sectors will benefit from our subsidies on loan interest payment, credit guarantee scheme, and in addition to this, they will have 15% cashback out of the whole amount of the loan. So, for example, if the beneficiary gets the loan of 1 million Georgian lari, they will get 150,000 Georgian lari back to their business, right? Which they can use either for the raw materials, either for the capex.
Operational costs.
Their choice, right? Yeah. And of course, the trainings, right? These all things cannot be done if the exporters are not, let's say, highly qualified. So you know that every year we have export certification program that at minimum is being graduated by 70 highly qualified export managers. These are the guys that go back to their companies and are conducting export operations and negotiating with foreign importers. So this is important. So with this, to conclude, you see that we diversify not just exhibitions, but we diversify products. And we are helping the companies from day one, from financing the factory from the scratch. When they are ready to export, then we help them for different things like certifying, training, and now we will also co-finance the entrance fees as branding as well. So it's a full scale of help from Enterprise Georgia, and you can see also the results. Yeah, every time we post the success cases of, I'm not going to mention the names, but every time you see that very specific individual success cases are coming in, like to Japan, to China, to Europe. So I think the future is bright.
Thank you, Misha, so much for the update, for the quick response, and my special thanks to you. Right now, I'm already in charge how Zirtkabila can be mentioned in English as well. So
it's my bad. I was preparing for this call, but I didn't translate it. So I just missed it.
But you know, it's quite difficult, and now you have the precise explanation how it is useful for our.
In pharmaceuticals, it contains vitamin C, and this is how it gets the.
I'm so happy with this diversification of our export goods. So good luck to you guys, and all the best to your team.
Time for some local news as well. The Ministry of Finance is working to abolish tax breaks for businesses. Lasha Kutsishvili, the Minister of Finance, said that his agency, with the involvement of USAID and IMF experts, was working to assess the effectiveness of each tax break, after which a decision would be made to cancel specific benefits. I share the view that tax breaks should be as specific as possible and as targeted as possible. All persons must not enjoy tax breaks if they don't need them, said Lasha Kutsishvili. Work on the assessment of tax breaks began during the previous Minister of Finance and has been continued for several months.
The chairman of the Budget and Finance Committee of Georgian Parliament, Irakli Kovzanadze, calls on the Ministry of Finance to further reduce the budget deficit. Reducing the budget deficit to 4% or less will be a real help to the National Bank of Georgia in reducing inflation and an important step towards macroeconomic stability, stated Kovzanadze. According to Irakli Kovzanadze, the steps taken by the government, in particular the Ministry of Finance, to reduce the budget deficit are appealing. However, he called on the government to direct all available reserves or whatever appears in 2022 to further reducing the deficit.
Continuation of the Namakvani plant project as well as ENKA's withdrawal with their own terms are considered equally, said the Minister of Economy Natia Turnava. She declares that the main goal of the Georgian government is to reach an agreement with the investor company ENKA Renewables. 2 weeks ago, representatives of the Georgian side and ENKA held 2 meetings in Europe. In September, ENKA Renewables made the decision to terminate the contract with the Georgian government. It became known from the announcement published by the parent company of ENKA Renewables on the Istanbul Stock Exchange.
In October, electricity consumption increased in Georgia. According to the electricity market operator, this figure exceeded 148 million kilowatt hours last month, which is around 23% more than in the same period last year. As for the occupied Abkhazia region, electricity consumption increased by around 15%. According to ESCO, local generation facilities generated 192 billion kilowatt hour of electricity, which is 40% more than in October last year.
This week, the French Business Confederation with the French Embassy visited Georgia, and for 2 days numerous meetings were scheduled, including with the Prime Minister, who briefed the entrepreneurs on investment opportunities and the business environment in the country.
Yes, David, the French Business Confederation also met with the President of Georgia and some representatives of the state bodies. There seems to be an interest in doing business in Georgia, and in a few months we might be able to see French companies starting to operate here. Maria Madami attended a press conference, and we will get more details from her in the checkpoints.
The plane landed directly from Paris to Tbilisi on November 15th. The flight was attended by the CEO of the French engineering company Aegis and its 29 members. A 2-day visit has started off a delegation from the French Business Confederation together with the French Embassy. Numerous meetings were scheduled, including with the Prime Minister, who briefed the entrepreneurs on investment opportunities and the business environment in the country. The meetings were also scheduled with the President and representatives of the state structures. As a result, today we can say that Georgia has really attracted the interest of French Entrepreneurs Association, and in a few months we will probably see the results of these meetings. That is, French companies will start operating in Georgia, which will ultimately affect the country's economy.
In my opinion, the visit met our expectations. We have been waiting for the implementation of this initiative since March 2020. The goal is to bring Georgia and the European Union closer. We are going to take effective steps in this regard. Accordingly, the companies that took part in the visit have already made future plans in Georgia, and some of them will start operating in the Georgian market in a few months. We hope that everything will go according to plan, especially in the field of infrastructure projects. They are interested in the World Cup planned in Bakuriani, as well as the tourism and agriculture sectors. Most importantly, this visit will continue in the future and the cooperation will deepen.
The purpose of the visit was to draw up an action plan for identifying and launching new business cooperation opportunities between France and Georgia. Businessmen working in the fields of infrastructure, engineering, agriculture, energy, and other fields who are part of the delegation of the French Entrepreneurs Association have studied potential investment projects in Georgia and adapted them to their own interests. As for the company Aegis itself, it is a large French company with a turnover of 1,200 million euros, which already operates in Georgia. Now they are starting to think about larger projects.
To answer more specifically why your country is attractive to us, I will single out 3 main criteria. First, macroeconomic stability. The Georgian economy has grown by 5% over the last 10 years. According to the forecast, it's expected to grow by 10% this year, given the post-pandemic period. In the coming years, about 7% is expected, and these indicators allow us to boldly start bringing French companies to the Georgian market.
According to the CEO of the company, the second important factor for French companies is the economic attractiveness that Georgia maintains, which means that foreign companies have the opportunity to enter the country quickly and start operating. He also mentioned the cheap workforce and friendly environment, which actually increases the interest for investors. He also assessed our country's ranking in the Doing Business rankings, where Georgia holds a leading position.
Given the example of our company, we will give preference to Georgia over other countries because of the Doing Business ranking. The ranking is a sign and proof that it's easy to do business here.
As for the third condition, highlighted by Mr. Laurent Germain, is the existence of interesting and ongoing projects in the country in terms of development. France can share its knowledge and experience in this regard. As we found out at the press conference, all 29 companies that arrived to Georgia during the visit want to focus more on Georgia and direct their investments to our country. Let's see what the result of the 2-day visit will be, but today the expectations are high and the plans are large scale. The fact is that Georgia really needs strengthening today in terms of new companies, investments, and most importantly, getting closer to the European Union.
Let's look at the region now. The Turkish lira sank further as the central bank slashed interest rates for the third consecutive month following pressure to do so from President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The bank cut its policy rate from 16 to 15% despite rising inflation and a fast depreciating currency, Turkish media reports. As long as I'm in this position, I will continue to fight against high interest rates. I will continue to fight against inflation, Erdogan said. The lira has lost 31% of its value against the dollar since the start of the year, and the annual inflation rate has reached nearly 20%.
After staging a recovery during the emergence from the COVID crisis, unemployment in Israel is back on the rise. In the second half of October, unemployment rose to 5.6% from 5.1%, the Central Bureau of Statistics reports. There are currently more than 300,000 jobless people in Israel compared with about 150,000 on the eve of the COVID crisis, Globe's reports. According to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, although Israel fared better than most member countries during the COVID crisis, it is expected to be among the last in seeing its job market recovery.
Production of electric cars is set to be launched in Kazakhstan starting from 2022, First Vice Minister of Industry and Infrastructure Development said. In order to develop the production of environmentally friendly vehicles, Kazakhstani automakers have already commenced the production of electric vehicles. The First Vice Minister also stressed that in order to support electric vehicles' effort and create necessary infrastructure, more than 100 charging stations has been installed in the cities of Nur-Sultan, Almaty and Pavlodar.
In January-October this year, more than 28 billion cubic meters of gas were pumped through Azerbaijan's main gas pipelines, reports informs, citing the State Statistics Committee, that this is 20.4% more compared to the corresponding year of 2020. In the total volume of gas pumped through the main gas pipelines, more than 50% came to the share of the Baku-Tbilisi-Erzurum pipeline. Over the reporting period, this pipeline transported around 14 billion cubic meters of gas, which is 46% more than the same period of last year.
Well, that's all for today. We will see you next Sunday at the same time in the same studio.
Before that, we will welcome you on our websites, bm.g and forbes.g, for more updates on business and economics. We will leave you off now with Guillaume Moulard's feature and see you on Sunday, 10 p.m. sharp.
Kamajoba. This is not a surprise. Some professional sectors have been more impacted by the COVID. This is especially the case for event organizers. Despite of the situation, a young and innovative company keeps on going and trying to make something innovative throughout the Georgian events landscape. I'm talking about Rainbow, created in Tbilisi 10 years ago.
Rainbow Events has been created in 2012, but it started more efficient work after 2015. The founder of the company is DJ Rainbow. He's been in this business for almost more than 15 years, and he was in events, so he decided to create his own company. And that's how it started. It was small at first, and then it started. He created the group company, he hired employees, and that's how it started all. And we've done more than 300 events, big, small, average, all sizes. We focus mainly on corporate events as well as private parties like weddings and birthdays and opening ceremonies as well. But mostly we focus on the corporate events. We work with large companies and also small companies. It doesn't depend how big the company is. For all the companies, we do the same amount of work, the same amount of group of people work there, so try to give them as much as we can. It's very hard to find people who will be loyal and who will do the work efficiently. So Rembo, Levan, he decided to work with his family. His sister and his wife are very much including in all of the decision making and all of the processes. And also we have, as me, I was hired 3 years ago. I've been here with them. And when there's big events, we outsource our employees, or we know people who are good workers and do good work. So that's how we operate. We mostly focus on Georgian and local companies, but there are some times that we have people who are from other countries coming here, do business, the people who do business here. Usually we got the customers' events from outside country by recommendations. The people who we work with, they give recommendations, and that's how they find us. And it's usually in the local business, it's the same way. When they're pleased with their work, when they're satisfied, they give recommendations, and that's how we get more clients. And also we have advertisements in Google, so that's how people from other countries find us as well. But unfortunately, at this period of time, there were a lot of people who wanted to come to Georgia and do events here, but COVID has restricted all of it, and unfortunately we had to cancel a lot of events because of that. When we start working, we're very focused on every detail, because every detail matters to us, even the small ones, because that's how we create the atmosphere of the event. And we're very friendly with them, as well, keeping the professional side with it. And that's what they like. They like communications with us. We're very open with communications with them. We try to give the best service, and we're very 100% and even more present in every detail. So I think it makes us unique because we're very focused on what we do. It was a very hard year for us. When COVID first hit, we had events planned and they canceled like 2 days prior the event, and it was a lot of tension. People were scared, people didn't know what was going on, so everything was canceled, and it was very hard for us. The first year, the next summer it opened a little bit, then it closed. It was like a game, like we're open, we can do some things, and now it's closed, we can't do it. It was very hard for us. We had to let go for some things, for some employees that were, unfortunately, couldn't keep them. But we used this time for our growth. We took some classes together, so we could learn some more and to be more prepared for what's going to be after COVID. We try to do some things like doing with all of the protocols that were in line, to use that to do the tests and then do the events. But we're still trying to figure out how we can live with COVID and work with COVID. So it was a very hard year. We tried to manage it as a team. Unfortunately, we didn't have the time to go somewhere and to see it by ourselves, but we usually watch videos, see photos. We watch all the big companies, what they do, what the trends are, so we keep with the trends and do everything like they do. Not like they do, but accordingly, so it's not out of picture. That's how we operate. We also would like to visit some conferences. There are some conferences how event can be planned and to have our growth as a company and as a person. But unfortunately, because of COVID, it was all stopped and we couldn't make it. But we hope that in some day, when it's all over, we can go and see ourselves and talk and to gain more partners as well, because that's the field when you can find out more about people, find some companies we can work together, and also introduce our country so they can come and do events there. So the conferences are very good, but unfortunately, because of COVID, we couldn't do it. But it's still hope for the future. By the events that we're organizing, first of all, we're giving a lot of joy to the people, and everyone who's leaving our party or event is always happy. And for the events, for the corporate parties, it's very structural. Usually the HR comes to us, so they have a strict plan. Like they have from the event to improve their quality of working, to make them more happy, to be more like to create groups of people who can work together. And usually we incorporate everything, all the details with HR. So we make their working place better with our events. That's how we think. As a company, we always try to find some new ways and new possibilities we can improve our company and events as well. We're very simple in working process, but we create something extraordinary with our experience, with what we gain, with our knowledge, and we try to give the best and to give them the wow effect that they all deserve and then what they want. For a young company, I think it's an advantage because we always have the room for growth. We can always growing and always going up the hill. Until COVID, we were going very high. We had a lot of events, and the quality of events from the first one to the next one was improving by little steps, but it was improving all the way. So as a young company, it's a good sign for us because we always improve and always try to keep up with the trends. We're always in the moment, and we try to find as much information for our growth and for our company's growth. During the COVID period, we also switched a little bit to doing only decorations. For example, for the malls, for the stores, as what they needed, we switched to that.
Georgia is a fertile ground for young and innovative projects. Taking example of what is done abroad, companies like Rainbow are improving the events in such a wonderful way, and this is one among a lot of dynamic teams made in Georgia.
The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.